Welcome to the PaleyFest Fall TV Previews. I'm Eric Deggans, TV critic for National Public Radio, and I am delighted to be your host for this special conversation celebrating NBC's acclaimed returning series, Found. And I'm pleased to host this conversation with the cast and creative crew, starting with Nkechi Okoro Carroll, creator, showrunner, executive producer, chief bottle washer. You got 1,000 titles. Head
I think I like.
Just say
I like
honcho.
chief bottle washer. I think I might go with that one for today.
Shanola Hampton, who stars as Gabby Mosley. Mark Paul Gosselaar, who stars as Sir. Gabrielle Walsh, who stars as Lacey Quinn. Arlen Escarpeta, who stars as Zeke Wallace. Karan Oberoi, who stars as Don Rana, and Brett Dalton, who stars as Mark Trent. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. And I understand this is the first panel where all of you have been together.
It's nice. We miss Kelly, but yes, it is the first one.
So awesome to have you all together. And please feel free to give each other a hard time while we're talking. we love that.
Gladly.
So, Nkechi, I want to start with you now. When I heard the story idea, it made all kinds of sense. I mean, a drama focused on a Black woman who's dedicated to finding these people who often get overlooked when they go missing. But then I hear this twist where she's got this crazy white guy chained to the basement. And I'm thinking to myself, where did this idea come from, and how tough a sell was it to even have a network make this thing?
Yeah, the original idea to do a procedural where we're looking for what we call the forgotten ones, right? The ones that the world has deemed are disposable. That idea came, 7-8 years ago. It was around the time we had those 14 missing Black and brown girls in the DC area. And we were all culturally talking about it online, but mainstream media wasn't. And so the idea was born from that. But I also have been in this business long enough that I knew if I walked into, my studio at the time, I was like, I want to do a show about the fact that y'all don't look for us. There would be no Found. And so I sort of spent time with these characters and sort of building out their lives to find what the best access point was to give us a thrilling show that people who may not necessarily be paying attention to everything else going on in the world or may not be aware would still be drawn to it because of the thrilling aspect, because of the casework, because of all those things that make a great drama or a great procedural. But at the same time, for those who were looking for something that had a little bit more meat to it, that spoke to what was happening in the world, it could also serve that purpose. So I created it and then I held on to it because I knew it was not the right time and I knew it would not land on network TV. And I love network TV, and it's no shade to cable or streaming or anything. I'm just a network TV baby. I love it. I grew up watching it. And it just gives me joy to create shows that appeal to bigger audiences. And so I held on to it until the tide started to change and I started to feel like, okay, maybe with the right pairing, I can get a show where a Black woman is keeping a white man in her basement on network TV. And it was one of those things where we went through the process and it originally did not make it to pilot. But it was one of those things where I knew the studio knew that we had a show here that was something special. And kudos to them for not thinking I was crazy and sticking with me when I kept being adamant that this was going to make it onto the air. And then our wonderful partners at NBC came knocking out of the blue to ask if I still had that script that they'd read a couple years ago. And when I said yes, but I'm not changing any of it. I'm not taking him out of the basement. I am not changing the core of who Gabby Mosley is. And they were like, we don't want a single thing changed. We want it the way it is. And that is how Found landed on the air.
So, Shanola, I got to ask you now, you got to play this woman who keeps this guy in the basement, right? And she's a fierce woman, obviously, but how do you keep the audience sort of rooting for Gabby, knowing that she has the capacity to keep a guy in her basement for like 9 months?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think what's interesting about our show is that you have the hero character that everyone generally speaking, everyone wants to root for, but Gabby is so layered with flaws that I think that you would see our audience and they're 50-50. Not everyone is rooting for her. And that's why I love our show. I love it because you have some people being like, but she's just as bad. And then you have to see the moral fiber, and we like conversations. And I like that NK and our writers created something that is not so black and white, where I have to make sure that everybody loves Gabby and her choices, because she hasn't made the best choices. She has reasons why, but they have not been good. And I think what Gabby Mosley has that is very different from Sir is that moral fiber of wanting to pay for her mistakes and wanting to own what she has done. And so I think it's so nice now, especially in season 2, to have 22 episodes where we can flush out that journey as well.
What's interesting, so like I'm an old school comic book nerd, so I look at Gabby in a weird way as sort of like Batman, where you're questioning, her. You don't question what she eventually ends up with, the justice she ends up with. You question her methods sometimes, and it feels like in the second season that's where that's going. Everybody is sort of like, are we down with this or not? Is that a fair reading?
I mean, I think in the second season, you get to see her really struggle with what she's done now that has come to light. It is a relief that is out in the open, but I think in a very human way, in a way that we have time to actually really breathe into it. You see her struggling with the guilt and the pain and the shame and the wanting to take ownership. And I think that as a human characteristic is what makes Gabby Mosley strong, is her ability to take ownership of her mistakes.
So, Mark Paul, this is so crazy. Like yesterday, I was just messing around on YouTube and I came across an old N.Y.P.D. Blue video, the episode where your character got accused of having drugs in his car and he had to be incarcerated for a while. And it just reminded me of your long history of playing good guys. And I'm sure that it's a little bit of a relief, or maybe a little bit of some freedom to play a villain. But I was wondering if there was anything about taking on a role like this that was a surprise for you. Even though it's something that people are not used to seeing you doing. What was the challenge in taking on playing a villain here?
I think playing a villain on a weekly basis can be challenging. You really have to rely not only on your team behind you, and thankfully I feel like we have a brilliant team that gives us material every single week that we can, that not only challenges us but also protects us, because it could be a tired formula. And also to play a bad person, I don't know. If you're seeing that every week, it gets tiresome. But NK and the rest of the team has really made all these characters so rich and so diverse and so well rounded that it gives us something to work on every single week. I think I tackled this. I first asked NK if there was anybody that I could use as a muse, and she gave me a few sort of directions to look in. And I'm just sort of going off of what they give us week in and week out. I tend to not play Sir as just a bad guy every week. I mean, there's reasons why he acts this way, and there's things that are happening that are constantly creating what you see week in and week out. But I feel like I'm along for the ride half the time. I let when we get these scripts, I mean, we're fans of the show just as much, I think, as our audience is. It changes every week, and I'm riveted by the material we get.
Interestingly enough, not everybody sees him as a villain. I mean, Mark Paul and I were at the Olympics together, and this woman
really irked you, by the way.
Well, it irked me for a lot of different reasons, which I won't get into, but she looked in my eyes and she said to me, "Oh my gosh, I love your show so much. And why did you make him so bad? You just made him bad. And you got him locked in your basement. And why did you make him such a bad guy?" And
I said, thank you for your understanding.
He said that. I said, oh, I made him bad. Got it. Cool. And it's so interesting to see. And a lot of it has to do with his charm. And some people think he's good looking. I'm not in that category of people. But, he has this thing about him where he delivers the not so villain. And so, and then again, that's what our show does. It's 50-50 really with Gabby, you're the bad one. And look at Sir, poor pitiful Sir in the basement,
One of the things I love so much is we get so much from women who are just like, he loves her. He's so attentive. I'm like, man, we need to raise standards. Like, I get that he's attentive, but like, I really need us to raise the bar. And it shocks me how much feedback I get, especially from women who are, this is why Ted Bundy got away with what he got away with, right? Very good looking, charming, could get women to do anything, and then they died. So yeah, but it cracks me up that he has such a strong fan base.
My mom is one of those women. She's like, when are they going to just get together? They should get together. I'm like, Mom, no, this is but the tension between them is so good. It's just like, there is that kind of the little skew that you have that's like, like, what is this relationship and how do they feed off each other? And it's not all black and white. So but.
Well, I was going to say, I think that's a tribute to the chemistry between you, Mark Paul, and Shanola. You guys have this chemistry on screen. And I was wondering, is that something that you've worked on, or how did that kind of emerge as you guys figured out what these characters meant to each other?
I don't know, Shanola. I just chalk it up to I'm a really good actor. I can have chemistry.
Yeah, he chalks it up. No, what he wanted to say, let me explain to you what he really wanted to say. What he wanted to say is I chalk it up as I found the right one and he's welcome, which we constantly send text messages. And the only thing that's is you're welcome. No, to really truthfully answer the question, and we do get asked this a lot. One of the things that I want to point out is that we have been conditioned as a society to see chemistry and automatically assume that it is asexual chemistry. I think what is wonderful about what people have been grasping from the first season is, wait, it's not sexual, but they have such this magnetic thing and trying to define. And what's great about what NK has created is you can't define it. It's weird. It gives you the creeps. It gives you the feels. It gives you all these things, and it's so undefined. But what I can say is Mark Paul and I are students. And every time we are together, we are learning from one another just by looking in each other's eyes. Mark Paul never comes with having practiced something in the mirror and then not being present in the scene with me. And that is something as an actor that is to be applauded and appreciated. So we don't even run lines together. From day one. Now, last week he was like, you want to run lines? I was like, are you being funny? Are you lying? Because we had a lot of dialogue. And I was like, don't mess up a good thing. And
Eric,
it's
just to be clear, it wasn't for my benefit. I could see that she was struggling during the rehearsals.
Dear God,
I just wanted to make sure.
When I say that this man, please know that it was for him. But it really was one of those things that I think that you cannot plan. And the reason why I don't run lines specifically in those scenes, and one of the things that I want to give the audience the organic feelings that we have when we're actually doing the work. I think that people can feel that. And I never know what he's going to do, and he never knows what I'm going to do, but we trust each other. And it's one of those lightning in the bottle kind of experiences to work with him and what we've been able to do together on screen. Off screen, I can't stand his butt. Like off screen, if he could lose my number, that would be great.
NK, at some point, I'm going to ask you how you referee all this. That'll be later.
Oh, I know. We just keep the camera rolling and we let it do its thing.
I wanted to direct a question to Gabrielle because, first of all, I got to wonder, how confusing is it to be on a show where another actor is playing the character named Gabby?
I already knew where you were going with that. That was like the number one question that I get from friends and family. I'm like, that's what you get out of what we like, really. It's been somewhat confusing, but not Not really. I think we kind of like understand like who's who, and we use each other's like real names. And then when we're on screen, and I mean, sometimes I use it and infuse it in the work. Like when I was auditioning for Lacey originally, and it was the scene where I'm telling Gabby to, run the water or get out the tub. And when I was doing it, I used different things as choices in my work. I used a part of myself, like, hey girl, get this together, you need to go now. Like, so it can be fun that way, but it wasn't it wasn't that much of a problem.
Yeah, I was actually just kidding with that, but I am interested. Like your character seems to inspire a lot of the other characters, and in some ways, she can be the emotional center of the show, and in particular, I think in the second season, without giving too much away. So, can you talk a little bit about how you create a character who's authentic and feels like a real person when so many of the other characters are sort of inspired by her, focused on her, idealizing her in their own ways?
Well, when I think of Lacey, I think of her heart. I think she cares deeply for each and every one of her team, and they've become her family. When in terms of her relationship with Gabby, like she has a, a strong bond with her and has found a sister in her. And so when Gabby created this team of other people who have gone through similar events together, it has made her, this is what she can contribute to it, is her light and her love. And I look at it from that perspective. I look at it as, how much she feels connected with these other characters and sees herself in them, and how can I utilize that in whatever I'm going after in a scene.
That makes sense. So Brett, I wanted to ask you, a lot of viewers may have first seen you on network TV, at least in Agents of Shield. And here you're playing a character that's not in sort of an established franchise. And I was wondering, is there much of a difference in playing a character that's part of a completely new universe, completely new series, supposed to playing a character in a universe like the Marvel world where so many things are preset and so many things have been around for a while?
Yeah, well, there's a lot less CGI. Um, I mean, I don't know. With the Marvel franchise, like we were also playing humans in a world filled with superhumans. So, it actually did feel like we were originating at that point. But I mean, this is not only a different universe, but it's also it's a different structure entirely. It is a procedural, but it is so filled with twists and turns. It's not predictable either. So I mean, NK has done such an incredible job. The entire team of writers has done such an incredible job. And I think that also we feed off of each other. I mean, I don't know how you come up with half the stuff that you do with Mark Paul and Shanola and all of that stuff that goes on in a basement. I do not know. But I mean, I would argue that has as much, if not more, drama than anything that I've done in the Marvel universe. I mean, this is so filled with twists and turns. It's kind of remarkable that we're still in the procedural mechanism, because it really doesn't feel like that. It feels like these are characters who all have their backstories. It's not like, oh, hey, we're back with the tech guy and the tech guy does this. It's like Arlen's got his whole story, and I know that there's A storylines, B storylines, C storylines, but it all feels like it's really shared organically and naturally, and everybody's got a lot to sink their teeth into. And that's what I think is so wonderful to play, and I think really, really good to watch as well, because like Mark Paul said, like I think we're fans of the show as well. So even as we're reading it, I'm like, oh yeah, oh, this is nice. And there's something that I know about, which I'm not going to talk about, but I was screaming for joy on this. I was like, you did what? I'm very excited for this season for myself, but also I think for the viewers as well. There's so many twists and turns here. It feels like we're at Six Flags.
Well, and I'm wondering too, it sort of feels like your character's in this odd triangle with Sir and with Gabby. And
Tell me about it, Eric. Tell me about it.
so how do you sort of get in the middle of that chemistry? Even, the real life actors have a great chemistry. How do you get in the middle of that?
Yeah, good question. Good question. I don't know. I mean, it's tough to play a character that is so frustrated by what he wants. I mean, this whole thing with Gabby has been there from the very beginning, and it's like a constant frustration. It's like, for me, Brett, watching it, I'm like, oh, if only they would have gotten together, and it's just it's tough to play. And you're right, as much as it's almost like a game of rock, paper, scissors or something. Like I might beat scissors, but I get covered with paper all the time. So as much as I have a thing for Gabby and like can turn a blind eye when she does stuff, as you said earlier, which I think is really great, we both have the same goal. We're just going at it completely differently. So yeah, I sometimes turn a blind eye or like look the other way when she bends the rules. But then again, there's this thing that somehow Sir constantly gets under her skin and gets her to do things maybe that she doesn't want to do. And I don't think they're meant for each other, but I do think they know how to push each other's buttons and how to get under each other's skin. And it goes deep. It's incredible. It's incredible to watch.
So, Karan, I wanted to ask you now, Gabby kind of turned you into a co-conspirator here, right? You found out about Sir before other people on the team did. And can you talk a little bit about how his feelings about Gabby and her methods may change, given that, she had to sort of tell everybody what's going on?
For Don, I think his loyalty is just unmeasured. Gabby had a hand in rescuing all of us on her team. So he says in the last, I think episode 12, he says it of last season, you do what you have to do to save a life. And because of Don's backstory, where he was held captive for years, he understands that vividly, that rescue is of the utmost importance for these individuals. And I don't think he wavers on that. He supports Gabby with that 100%.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So Arlen, I wanted to ask you, man. I've seen your IMDb. You've played characters ranging from an aspiring rapper in the Friday the 13th reboot to Bobby Brown, and and I'm not going to ask if it's frustrating to be the guy stuck inside, playing agoraphobic, but tell me a little bit about the challenge of making that interesting when this guy can't go outside.
I think from an acting perspective, it's challenging, just because every day you got to make it different and make it new. Working, by yourself sometimes can be challenging, but then we have a great team. Everyone on the other side of the screen, as we call it, is always in contact with me, showing me a lot of love. I can scoot over there if I need to. They can come and visit me. And thankfully now a lot of Zeke's getting a lot of company. A lot of people, a lot of things are done where the team is coming over to Zeke, same things, they're working together, they're together. However, Zeke is, it's not hard because Zeke is, I call him a romantic. He's romanticized family. He's romanticized his idea of how things should be. And so it's fun to see him get disappointed here and there and try to figure out what's really outside. And because of his agoraphobia, he really has created a self-contained bubble that keeps himself safe and sound. And he's constantly being challenged and pushed, whether it's solving a case or, realizing and finding out that, your family's not exactly who they say they are. It's a lot of fun from an acting perspective.
Yeah, and that's something that I also wanted to ask you about because, of course, one of the things that you want to do when you have a long-running series is kind of subvert people's expectations. So at the end of the first season, we sort of have a huge challenge for this found family, which is that they find out that Gabby's been holding this massive secret from them. And just from your perspective as a guy who's playing Zeke, he seems to really be invested in this idea of this found family. And then all of a sudden he finds out that Gabby's not necessarily who he thought she was. What's your sense about what that does to him, particularly as we go into the second season?
I think it can do a couple things, the veil's been pulled back for Zeke, the wizard doesn't know everything, and it's gonna be interesting, and I'm very curious to see exactly where it goes, because it could break them apart, it could bring them closer together, but for Zeke specifically, it's really gonna make him realize that it's not what your brain and your head tells you it is. There's layers to people, and everybody is not perfect, everybody is flawed to a certain degree. And like I said, Zeke romanticizing his friendships, his family, his relationships across the board, I think is going to be it's his Achilles heel, but it's also his blessing. It's his heart. It's why he is who he is, but at the same time it can definitely create hurdles for him at the same time.
So, NK, I wanted to ask you, I mean, given all the challenges that we saw the industry face last year, two strikes, all this concern about the economy, you come along with a new series that actually succeeds, and it's not even based on existing IP. I mean, this feels like a miracle in a way. So tell me, if you can, how you think it worked, why you think it worked. What's the secret here?
I mean, first of all, you've met the amazing cast. Like it's you ask how I sort of navigate. I don't. They all are so phenomenal at what they do. These were very complicated characters. I lived with them for a lot of years before I ever put them on the page. And every single one of them landed the role. First of all, Shanola was just on a Zoom, and it wasn't even about this show. And I literally, poor woman, I stopped listening to what we were talking about because I was like, oh my God, she's Gabby. She had no idea about the project, nothing, until the Zoom was over. And I was like, can I email you something? But each one of them are in that role because they took characters that I'd created in my mind, that I'd lived with for a while, and they elevated them in ways I could have never imagined. And so truly the blessing of this show and the miracle of this show is all the pieces that came together to make it what it is. Like, yes, I was very passionate about the story I wanted to tell. I was very passionate about the characters I put on the screen. But every person that came on board, every team member that joined, from the cast to my writers to our director who directed the pilot, Demaine Davis, everyone brought their own passion, their own personal feelings about the subject matter, about the characters, about healing from trauma and turning it into purpose. It was literally like I found my people and brought all of them together on the same project. And like Voltron, it formed. And so, as much as I would love to be like, oh yeah, no, I know the secret sauce, and truly, this project has been such a blessing to me because of the people it brought in, even our crew members, like the number of crew members who've come to me to personally talk about, I saw this news report on this missing person, and now I'm looking at it differently because of the show. Everyone is bringing their heart and soul, which is more than I could ever ask for, from top all the way down. And I think that has ultimately been what has created the success of Found. It's the thing that has made it relatable. It's the thing that has made it resonate with people. And I'm grateful that I get to be along for the ride, and that they continue to trust me with the stories we're telling. It really has been a blessed experience.
So, Shanola, I wanted to ask you, we have talked a lot about the cat and mouse, of course, between Sir and Gabby, but behind that, or in front of that, or next to that, is this idea that you're showcasing stories about people who go missing, who normally don't get paid attention to. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what the show has to say about that now that we're going into the second season. What does it have to say about who we value and who we don't, and maybe how we should be rethinking some of those things in real life?
I think that we have to make no mistake about it. That is our show. That is why we do our show. Our show has a wonderful dynamic between Sir and Gabby, but the reason why we wanted, and why I wanted to do Found, and why I wanted to bring this to life for NK was because the passion she had for the same things that I had, and that was to bring light to those who do not get coverage. And that is our show. So you can be entertained by all the other stuff, but what we want to do is have the conversation be about those who are not being talked about. And you get to see that in so many different versions. This is not a Black show. This is a show about people who are not being served on a national. So we have transgender, we have elderly, we have homeless, addicts, all of it. And I think that one of the things that we have to make sure that we continue to do, and what I know that the writers do, is they bring personal stories to each episode, and it means something to them. We did Indigenous last year, but it's always something that feels personal, and that's what our show is. That's what our show is to bring light to those who have been forgotten, that we call. But what I will say is who are no longer gonna be as forgotten, because I do believe that this show, and Kay has said it, I have had people of all walks of life and all ages and all ethnicities say something in particular about, I didn't know that this was a thing, or I didn't know, or whatever it is. And to me, that's what brings me the gratification. I love that the show is a success, but I like the conversations more.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that comes across in this panel is how much you guys seem to enjoy being with each other and working with each other, which is wonderful to see. But I'm gonna stir the pot a little bit and ask, who's the biggest troublemaker on the set?
Karan.
AK, who you gotta rein in the most? That's what I want.
I don't have to rate. This is what's beautiful about it, is when it's time to do the work, they do the work. So I actually just get to enjoy all the shenanigans that go down. And, I'm not always in Atlanta when we shoot, but the set streams to my office. So nothing gives me more joy than, sort of we're in between a take and I'm waiting for them to turn around or whatever. And then I suddenly hear, whether it's Shanola and Paul, or it's, or whether it's Karan and Arlen, like the stuff that feeds through to my office is hilarious. And every once in a while, I'll shoot them a text out of the blue. Like I'll text Karan and be like, really, that's what we're going with? And he's like, wait, I forgot you can hear. I'm like, oh, I can hear it all. So yes, the beautiful thing is I don't actually have to wrangle any of them, because the minute the camera starts rolling, everyone locks in, they're prepared. They are professional, they respect each other, and therefore are really there to do the work. But the part that gives me the most joy is them in between the scenes. I mean, during it was our hair and makeup test for the pilot, how Shanola and Paul, I don't even think you guys, maybe you'd run into each other before or whatever, but literally I'm standing there with our director for the pilot, hair and makeup test. We hear loud singing. We have no idea where it's coming from. It's Shanola entering the building. And it's gospel singing, it's loud and everything. And then we hear Shanola yell, there's Paul, and she runs and leaps. Paul had no choice but to catch her. If he didn't catch her, she was hitting the floor. And that was their meeting. And I turned around to our director and I was like, oh, we're going to be on the air for a very long time. And it's just the natural chemistry that this whole cast has with each other. They're phenomenal. If my family wasn't in LA, I'd be down there on set with them every day, because they're truly, truly a joy.
See, NK, you had the exact opposite reaction that I had when that happened and she jumped in my arms. You thought, wow, this is a series that's going to last forever. I actually called my reps and said, I think this show is going to tank. This is a drama, and she's treating this like a comedy. I'm like, I don't think this is going to last. I'm just saying, I don't think this pilot's going to go. And I was wrong.
Now you're stuck with us.
Yeah, now I'm stuck with you.
That's amazing. Well, I want to thank all of you guys for joining us here. And I want to thank the audience for joining us for this special PaleyFest Fall TV Previews conversation with NBC's Found. You can enjoy more of these programs by clicking the subscribe button below. And of course, Found comes back for its second season in October. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you so much, cast and crew.
Thank you, Eric.
Bottle washer.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
So
you
much
so
fun.
much.